It's Friday, March 14th, 2025, a Friday 5-pack previewing a very special edition of the AM Update coming up next week. And of course, Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's next on the AM Update. Of course, the big news coming out of yesterday is that Russian President Vladimir Putin signaled he's okay, or at least open, to talking about a ceasefire.
We agree with the proposals for the ceasefire, but our position is based on the assumption that the ceasefire would lead to a long-term peace, something that would remove the initial reasons for the crisis.
The initial reasons for the crisis. When I heard Vladimir Putin say that, I had kind of an aha moment, but in reverse. I don't even remember what the initial reasons for the crisis was, other than, of course, the obvious that there's a dementia patient in the White House at the time. Do you remember what the initial reasons for this invasion, this latest invasion of Ukraine were? I don't remember them at all. But Vladimir Putin says he's ready to talk, at least talk for now. I mean, this thing has gone on a lot longer than I think the Russians had anticipated or wanted. So I think there's some pressure on them for sure, but they're not going to walk out of this thing with nothing in their hand. Moving on, told you about Chuck Schumer playing chicken with a government shutdown yesterday. Well, last night it was reported he's going to cave, along with most of the rest of the Democrats, and vote for cloture, 60-vote threshold. Here's Senator Cory Booker talking about the predicament Democrats are in.
This is saying, let's just give up even more of our constitutional authority because, hey, he can do a lot worse later on. And so to me, that's capitulating to someone who's already showing that he's reckless and willing to do a lot of destruction. We are in a perverse, bizarro land where we're having to decide between letting Donald Trump wreck the government this way or wreck the government that way. So at what point do you say I'm going to stand and fight?
So I'm not really sure what Cory Booker was saying there. Not really saying, because they are screwed one way or another. They can't just allow Donald Trump to run the government during a government shutdown. They also don't want to be seen as capitulating to Donald Trump by passing the CR that he wanted. Yet it seems like that's exactly what they're going to do. Democrats on Capitol Hill in the Senate capitulating on the continuing resolution. Earlier this week, I told you about Congressman Keith Self, big old helmet sticker for him, not playing the game, not playing the pronouns game with Tim McBride, who goes by Sarah and is a dude who pretends to be a man. After referring to Democratic Representative Sarah McBride, Tim McBride of Delaware, as Mr. McBride during a congressional hearing this week, Representative Keith Self of Texas said he's not obligated to engage in McBride's fantasy. While discussing the issue, Self referred to McBride, who identifies as a troon, using male pronouns. You heard that earlier this week. Self told Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, quote, "I'm a retired Green Beret. I'm not even sure what this fuss is all about." He went on to say, he's allowed to live his life. In fact, I spent 25 years on active duty defending his right to live as he chooses, but I don't have to participate in his fantasy, end quote. So Congressman Self not backing down in the least. And there's this, Pete Buttigieg, former transportation secretary. There's widely rumored, he was going to be running for Michigan's Senate. Well, that's not going to be the case anymore. Politico is reporting he's not going to run for Senate, and he confirmed as much yesterday as well. Politico heavily hinted that he wants to run for president. I saw Mark Halperin, veteran journalist, the other day, say that Pete Buttigieg is problematic as a presidential candidate because he is short and gay. I disagree with that. I think he's short, gay, and retarded. And finally, there's this on a Friday 5-pack. Anthony Mackie is the star actor in the Captain America movie Brave New World. Mackie caught some flack in the lead-up to the release of Brave New World for his comments about Captain America not really being based on anything American. But he's in the news again this week for these comments. Kind of wish he would have made these prior to the movie.
I keep my boys humble. Like, my boys have never had a pair of Jordans. You know, my boys don't do all that internet fly shit. I'm like your kids. And no, I don't give a I could be the biggest star in the world. Do not let me catch you being stupid. Mm-hmm. Do not. And my oldest gets it. My 15-year-old, he tells the other ones, he's like, yo, don't make dad mad. Because once you get one that's right, he's going to straighten the other ones out. Mm-hmm. So it's just that thing of, in the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities, for one reason or another. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. Right. But my boys will always be respectful. They will always say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am. They will always say thank you. They will always open the door for a lady. They will always make sure that their mother is taken care and provided for. They will always be men. And that's always since they were 2 years old. Every time I left for a job, I tell my 15-year-old, you're the man of the house. You make sure these doors are locked every night, this alarm is on, you text me or you call me every night before you go to bed and you wake up.
I love that.
Because we're men. If I'm not there to protect, he got to be there to protect. Because you can have all the money in the world, climb through the window, that money means nothing.
Right.
You can have all the celebrity in the world, jump through the door, that celebrity means nothing.
Yeah.
So you got to have a little guard in there, you know? And so for me, it's always that idea of American masculinity is very different.
So that is actor Anthony Mackie. It's a far different tune, and I said at the time that I thought his comments about Captain America being construed in ways that are not really American, or he's not really a uniquely American figure. I thought he was talking about the universal values that are not just embodied by Captain America, but can be embodied by everyone. But a lot of people, especially on the right wing, took that as if he was dissing America in general. But here he is, just flat out saying, you just heard him say there, that masculinity in America has been under attack. And he just spelled out, very surface level, but still solid pillars of what it means to be a man, a protector and a provider. That's not all there is, but it's good to hear him saying that nonetheless. All right, that's it for a Friday 5-pack of stories. Next week on Friday, you're going to hear a very different edition of the AM Update. For the first time ever, I am unveiling what I'm calling an AM Update Special. No, this is not some sort of throwaway little project that I did so I could give myself a day off. I've been working on this for weeks. It's only going to end up being about 20 or 25 minutes long. But I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. I noticed it's not really a new trend, but I noticed it nonetheless recently on Facebook. It seems on the surface to be really non-consequential, non-eventful. But the more I started thinking about it, the more it disturbed me. And I needed a psychologist to help me make sense of just what was going on here with this phenomenon that I observed. So that's going to be the AM Update Special next Friday. You're not going to want to miss it. All right. If you would, as always, give me a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. I'd covet those. Those always help me out, and I appreciate all of you who have already done so. Follow me on X, @RealAMUpdate, and on Instagram by the same name, too. Let's go to Ask or Tell Me Anything. I asked you to tell me any story you think needs covered on the AM Update, or ask me any question you would like. Let's start with Don Milne. Another great week of updates. It's Goldilocks listing, not too long, not too short. You may not want to think about how many of your listeners are in the shower. Well, now I am, Don. Any recommendations on Christian Worldview podcasts? I like The Deep End with Taylor Welch. Very profound content. Yeah, I'm still a huge fan of Ligonier Ministries. That was R.C. Sproul's ministry, God rest his soul. They still produce content to the best of my knowledge. And of course, they still have lectures and sermons from the late, great R.C. Sproul. So that's one that I like. And that's kind of what I always tell people when I get questions like this. Country Squire says, thank you for covering the persecution of Syrian Christians. Over 1,000 men, women, children murdered by jihadists. These events do not fit the media narrative and are being memory holed. Keep up the good work. 1 Corinthians 16:13. Yeah, and I saw something about there's debate whether or not there were actually Christians murdered. Let's just grant that. There's a question whether or not Christians were actually murdered in this, kind of crossfire we're being told between the old pro-al-Assad forces and the new jihadists who are trying to run things in Syria. Notice how there's only a debate one way. I noted the other day, it's only, if there's a drop of Hamas, Gaza resident blood, when it comes to the UN, when it comes to the mainstream media, we need to just stop the earth from spinning to cover that. But when there's reports of upwards of 1,000, some of them Christians, some of them families, children, being murdered by jihadists, or at least caught in the crossfire. Not only is there no attention paid, now we're going to have a debate whether or not that report is actually true. It's amazing how this always cuts one way. When we come back, more Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's coming up next. Speaking for myself personally, this is one of those weeks, everybody has them in whatever job you're blessed to do, but one of those weeks where it just seemed like you cannot keep your head above water. So I'm glad it's finally at the end. I appreciate that. And this is also interesting this week. It was still a lot of news, about approximately 150 to 300% more news this week than we would have gotten on any week with the Biden administration, almost any week. You know, that's still the Trump administration for you, but it seemed like this week it was a little bit slower than we've witnessed in weeks past. A little bit slower. Not saying anything, just they're not going to be able to keep up the pace forever that they were in the first few weeks. It's amazing that they've made it this far with the pace they've been keeping. All right, more Ask or Tell Me Anything. Dr. Griffin says, or Dr. Griffin, not sure which one that is, bird flu came from a lab in Athens, Georgia. He quotes this tweet from Nicholas Hulsher, name I'm not familiar with, but it says he's an epidemiologist and administrator at the McCullough Foundation. That would be involved with Dr. Peter McCullough, who is a name that I trust. Here's what Mr. Hulsher writes. Our study concluded that the current H5N1 bird flu outbreak may have originated from the USDA Southeast Poultry Research Laboratory, and not a single U.S. government agency has challenged our findings. Do you have something to say, Abby? Can you say da 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 da? Would you be surprised if that's true at this point? Because I wouldn't. Almost nothing would surprise me at this point. Think about that. The sweet serendipity, let's just call it serendipity. H5N1, according to the McCullough Foundation and their study, originated from a domestic lab, a USDA lab in Georgia. Okay, that's a government lab. Naturally, the government tells poultry farmers, kill all your chickens. Bada bing, bada boom, a dozen eggs is $10. I mean, if that is not an analog, if that's not just the perfect story for government, I don't know what is. Finally, this from Alex Pfeiffer, who says, never forget what Fauci and many others did to us. I know most people can think of the others or others we know personally negatively affected by the jab. The two people closest to me negatively affected are my brother, who died of cardiac arrhythmia 2 days after he got the jab. And then there's yesterday, my brother-in-law, who was life-flighted to the local hospital, where he had to go into immediate open-heart quadruple bypass surgery from multiple blood clots. Attached to the photo of the clots. Justice from our Creator will come to those who are behind this. However, these people need to be sent to their final judgment sooner and be made an example. Hashtag never forget. Alex, I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry about your brother and now your brother-in-law. And you're absolutely right. We cannot forget this. Examples have to be made. I will still maintain I'm overall optimistic from what we're seeing, really up and down the new Trump administration. We have to get arrests, though. Bad people need to live in fear that they will be held accountable for what they've tried to pull over the past now 5 years. We ellipsed the anniversary of March 11th, which is really the day that the world went crazy back in 2020. 5 years. Not enough accountability. Not enough accountability. If they don't start arresting people, and this is really across the board, there are a lot of people in basically every field that need to be made examples out of, but yours is probably the most poignant in public health. Fauci needs to be put on trial. this new Redfield, the old CDC director, I'm not buying his convenient turnaround here. He's trying to rehab his image, and he's been doing that for years now. Don't let him. Don't let him. People have to pay. And then I've got this pit in my stomach, too. And don't get me wrong. I was reading some stuff the other day. Donald Trump's in a real tough spot when it comes to the economy. I think he's doing his absolute best, and he understands that there's going to be some short-term pain. And he's hinted at, he's hinted as much in the last couple of weeks, both with that interview that I told you about on Monday with Fox News' Maria Bartiromo. But he said basically the same thing during his joint address to Congress, that there's going to be some short-term pain. But it seems like what he is going for, a combination of tariffs. Oh, really? Yeah, tariffs are funny. A combination of tariffs and some of the other measures that he's taking with the U.S. economy. I think I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Kobayashi letter. They're basically saying that Donald Trump's goal here is to refinance American debt because of the bill that's coming due soon. Who knows if that is the case, but he is in a real pickle. However, having said that, if there are not people who are made examples of in the first, whether it's on the Epstein, whether it's in the Justice Department, whether it's in public health, people need to be made examples out of. And if that doesn't happen in the first couple, 2-3 years, people are going to say, oh, Donald Trump was one of a kind, but ultimately his legacy is basically just like everybody else, any other Republican. That's my fear anyway. That's going to do it for a Friday. Sorry to end on a sour note, but your week doesn't have to end that way. Bella and I are going to be back for No Suck Saturday tomorrow morning. 5 news stories we think objectively do not suck, along with our study through the Book of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Join us tomorrow morning for No Suck Saturday. Hope you have a wonderful Friday. If you're not over here on the weekend, see you back here on Monday.